Hello, everybody. Thank you, Teron, for this experience and this opportunity. I'd like to start with a quote from Virginia Woolf. We, I mean all human beings, are connected. The whole world is a work of art. We are parts of that work of art. We are the words. We are the music. We are the thing itself. Close your eyes and imagine what your world would be like if there were no stories. It is difficult to imagine such a world because human beings seem to be natural storytellers. We transform everything we experience into a story, from the first iconic first date to the everyday trip to the grocery store down the street. All is fodder for the story machine. The formula for story has been ingrained in the minds of children from the first time they hear a tale. These simple stories apparently have an important function. Among other things, they carve a path in our brains that makes it possible for us to establish vital connections between our own minds and the world outside, a process that begins earlier than we had ever imagined. Alison Gopnik has explained at length the function of causal maps, the construction of which begins in early childhood. Without them, it would be impossible to imagine the world as other than it is. It would not even be possible to dream. Moreover, because story is a tool for explaining the self and for learning to comprehend and navigate the world, it is not a mere byproduct of language, as some have argued, but stands at the very forefront of important developments in human cognition from the very beginning. Over the years, my students have told me what literature, and in particular fiction, has meant to them. Just recently, I asked them to write down their responses to one question: why are stories powerful in your own life? And here are a few of their responses. Rocky said, fiction is a new way to try and untie the knots in our emotions. Amy said, stories have something in them that we as readers can connect to. Trey told me that hope is what we seek to gain while we continuously run away into these stories, these places that are aside from our own reality. And Pam said, every time I read a new story, I learn something new about myself or a new way of thinking completely. Their anecdotal comments illustrate that stories communicate a truth about human life that we are drawn to time and time again. We might even venture to say that the history of humanity itself is one long unfinished story, overflowing with millions of smaller stories. As a central human activity, one that occupies much of our time, storytelling organizes our experience and thus our lives. So why do humans tell stories? In my book, I explore such questions as what compels us to create fictions to such a great extent that practically everything we know about the world comes to us through some form of narrative, whether scientific, philosophical, or literary. How can we take our knowledge about fiction and gain understanding of not only the broad human story, but also the ways in which individual writers such as Woolf have contributed to that knowledge about who we are as human beings? How can we use this knowledge to better understand each other, thereby creating strong and lasting bonds across diverse cultures? It is human nature to establish communities, and stories have the power and potential to intervene in the sharpest of divisions. Throughout history, in the most unlikely unions of diverse groups, stories have served to strengthen social bonds, increasing the likelihood of long-term survival. As I explain in my book, stories entertain us in limitless ways, but they do so much more than entertain. They are our lifeblood. Even when we sleep, we're telling stories to ourselves that our brains cannot help but create. From the stories in our dreams to novels by writers like Virginia Woolf, stories shape who we are and give us the tools we need to fashion our world. Darwinian evolutionary theory provides a way to explain the role of story in human survival, not only as individuals, but on a grander scale, as a species. Literary Darwinism gives us new ways of understanding the role of fiction in everyday life. From this vantage point, we can see that an ability to create stories, like the acquisition of fire, would have given us an enormous evolutionary advantage. Bringing a group of people together creates safety, security, and bonds of loyalty. Stories teach pattern recognition, which aids in our ability to predict outcomes in unknown situations. Further, stories engage both hemispheres of our brains and involves several complex structures simultaneously, similar to the effects of music. Contrary to the way many of us might think, while an interest in stories certainly begins in childhood, storytelling is not just for children at bedtime. It is our default mode as human beings. Thank you.